What happens when two seasoned business leaders get together? They talk shop, of course. Sit back and listen in as Scott DeLong and Vince Moiso share from their experience around current issues facing executives, entrepreneurs, and their leadership teams. The CEO Podcast starts now.
Hey everybody, Scott DeLong with the CEO Podcast. I'm here again with Vince Moiso, my partner, Season 4, Episode 3. Before we get started though, I want to talk a little bit about how to find us, right? So we are really focusing on Apple Podcast and Spotify, in addition to YouTube. We're going to continue to do the videos on YouTube as well, if you like to see it that way. But rather than say we're everywhere, and you can find us everywhere, we'd really like to focus some of you back down to Apple and Spotify.
Yeah. So follow us there. You can subscribe on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, please. Right. So follow us, and then give us a like, give us a comment. We'd love to hear that. And
also send us an email if you got a question, a concern, a topic that you'd like to hear about. Scott and Vince, Scott A&D Vince @gmail.com. Will get to us and we'll put the topic on the air. We like talking, so the more topics we have that you are interested in, the better the podcast is going to be.
We want your feedback.
Okay. All right. So here we are, Episode 3. Thought was important to talk a little bit about at the beginning of the year is this concept of employee retention.
Yeah.
We're going to do a little bit on employment law in the next episode, I believe. But the retention piece is equally as important because of the cost of replacing people. And what does it take to do that? Right? Not just the cost, but the time wasted and all those things. Sure. Yeah. So I thought we'd get into that. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine today. He's a data scientist. We're working on a project together, and we were talking about millennials and the Gen Z. Life expectation for a position with those folks is about 5 years right now.
Yeah.
And my point is, it doesn't have to be. It is based on how they want to live their lives and all of those kind of things. And we just think that we need to assume that, but I don't think so. I think the point of the matter is that it's a leadership question. And talking about old school leadership versus one of the progressive styles of leadership is going to matter to these folks. Happy people don't leave. If they're satisfied with their job, they're satisfied with their boss, satisfied with their pay, satisfied with their commute or lack thereof, or whatever's interested in them, there's no reason for them to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't believe that it's the millennials or the Gen Z people's fault that they're only staying in jobs 5 years. I think it's ours.
Well, I think what you have, there's been a massive paradigm shift, right? So I go back to my dad's generation and my uncle's generation. My uncle was with ITT Cannon for 40 years and retired with his pension and, that type of stuff. So I think there's just been, in the last generation or two generations, there's been a massive paradigm shift among businesses. So gone are those type of pensions, and gone is that type of long-term pay. I don't want to say that like not everybody. There's still that's going around. People work for businesses for a very, very long time for the reasons that you mentioned. I'm just saying like it's a shift. And in the small business world, and I want to bring this up because when you talk about employee retention, it's a challenge across big business and small business. I don't care, the size of the business. A lot of people don't know that small business runs this country. We do not employ the amount of people that we employ without small business. And, I'm talking about, and of all businesses, only 4% of them even make $1 million in revenue, right? So you're talking your mom and pop, your flower shops, your restaurants, your local shops, right? The cleaners, all these shops that employ so many people. So really, I'd like to focus this employee retention conversation around small business. And I think that's really, who our listeners are as well. And the only thing I want to say about that is, I don't care if you're Gen Z, Gen X, or whatever, or a millennial, doesn't matter. I think because of that paradigm shift that I've mentioned, and if you equate that to this small business, sometimes there's just not opportunity to grow enough within a small business. And so I do think you have to be, as a business leader, you have to be open-minded that if you can get an employee to give you 5 years of very solid work. And if you don't have upward mobility for them and they go move on, you should celebrate it, because
that's not their fault.
They only have that opportunity because
you can't blame them for that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, young people in particular, they want this upward trajectory to what their career, happiness, lifestyle, all those things that go together. And if you can't provide it for them, wish them well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Train them as much as you can train them, and let them go and wish them well. There's really nothing wrong with that. And it's a really good attitude to have as a small business owner, taking these young people and helping them grow and then letting them go as well. And that's okay. But what I want to focus a little bit about is some of the, you call it a paradigm shift, on some of the things that we need to do in order to create the opportunity for people to stay.
Yeah.
Or therefore, for the opportunity for not having to have them go out and put their resume on the street, which is the opposite side of the same coin. You've been running a business with 75, 80 employees, something in that range for a while now. Well, what have you done? First of all, have you focused on this employee retention as an issue? And what are the kind of steps that you've taken for that?
It's absolutely a focus, and I'll sum it up in one word. I mean, you remove compensation. Compensation and benefits are obviously extremely important, and I do want to talk about that as a part of employee retention. But I'll sum it up in one word: development. I mean, people want to grow. They want to grow individually. They want to be able to grow within a business professionally, but they want to grow personally. They want to
make it 2 words: development and opportunity. Because earlier you said maybe there's not the opportunity to grow too, but you still want to develop those folks.
Yeah.
Right. It's good for us to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So development and opportunity.
Well, and develop them, and I think you've heard me say this before in previous podcasts, is I believe in developing people, developing them as a person, as an individual. Training is one thing. Right. I think there's certain things, you've got a particular software, you've got equipment, or you've got systems that you need to train people on. Training is an important part of that. I'm talking about development. I'm talking about leadership development. I'm talking about communication development. I'm talking about that more esoteric, the soft skills that we talk so often about. Yeah. And you just got to develop people. And I think, I've said this before, I think a few times in podcasts as we talk about it, my favorite thing in the world is when I'm having a one-on-one. And, the previous week we've been working on communication, or, I have valued members that are getting coached by you that say, this is what I learned from Scott, or this is what I learned from what you said. And oh, by the way, I did that with my husband or my daughter.
So that's the part that I like.
That is that's the absolute best, because that's ultimately what it's about. And so I think there's a bond and a connection that gets built that you can't even put a value on, a number on it. It's just invaluable.
So I'm glad you said that, because development to me is this whole person, as you said. And my point to almost all of my customers, and sometimes I get hired for a very specific thing, but for almost all my customers, the message is this stuff is going to work at work. It's going to help you get the things that you want done. It's communication, trust, development, all those. Same techniques work at home.
Yeah.
It's the same techniques that'll work at home as well. Now, they may take a little longer at home.
Yeah.
And here's why, right? At least here's what I think, right? My theory on it is that my wife knows me better than anybody, right? And I've given her 27 years of marriage on how I'm going to act and react. So the last several that I've been getting better at this aren't the fallback position for her. She remembers things from 27 years ago, right? Expectations on what might happen. So it takes a little bit longer for it to click at home than it will in the office, but it will click, and it will make your relationships with your kids better. Better communication is going to work with your kids. It's going to work with your spouse. It's going to work with your neighbors. It's going to work with the guy at 7-Eleven when you're buying your Slurpee. It's going to work everywhere you go, not just in the business.
Well, so I want to say this because you bring up such a good point, is that then that behavior becomes embedded in your culture.
Right.
And so I want to translate that over. So as I said, I summed up in retention and one word, development. Now I want to take it to the next level, and I want to talk about culture. And I think where a lot of small businesses miss is this topic of values and culture, and how important it is to create it, or how important it is to have a vision, to have it, up on the wall, to have it visible for everybody so everybody can be connected to it, to have clear values that match your own values. Because if your business values don't match your own values, you got to disconnect. If you didn't know that. And then, you've got to have people working for you that are also bought into those values.
Who also value those same things.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't have to be their core values. Like religion is going to be somebody's core value. It's not going to be part of my business, right?
Sure.
So it doesn't have to be one of their core values, but it has to be something that they value strongly.
And believe in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if they're bought in, I mean, Scott, this is like, if they're bought into that and your whole culture is bought into that, it's like you've taken another step toward great. We're talking about this as part of retention, right? Mm-hmm. So in retaining people in your business, great book for everybody to read, by the way, Tribes by Seth Godin. Yeah. I know you've read it. Read the book because it'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about. And people want to belong to a tribe, right? They want to belong. We have as human beings.
They will find a tribe.
An innate sense of belonging. Yeah. And we're going to spend as much time at our workplaces as we are anywhere else. And therefore, you've got to be able to create a culture. You got to have these values that people are connected to, that they believe in, and that are their values as well. So when you have that example, one of our values is empowerment, as you know, and we work very hard to empower people to do their job. People want to be empowered. People want to do a good job. People want to succeed, and they want to feel successful. Yeah. So no better way to honor them than to empower them with what you've hired them to do in the first place. And so I think that's just one example, but it's a simple way where when you're talking about retaining, especially key employees, retaining key employees is you got to let them go. You got to let them fly.
So while you were talking, those of you on YouTube saw me smiling because a story came to my head. A story I didn't really know. Right? And it just came about. So Sarah Mirando is my co-author on the new book that's being released, right? Yeah. And she wrote the foreword. And the first one she wrote is like, it's pretty milquetoast. Why don't you tell a real story, right? So she came back and she wrote this story about the first time that she met me. And we were on a retreat, the first time that her company had hired me to do a retreat. And she was working for an entrepreneurial guy. She called him a chase the butterfly kind of guy, right? Mm-hmm. A new idea here and a new idea here. And they thought I was going to come and structure them to create this plan that's going to be exactly so that they have to follow it and be very linear and all that. And she said that the first day we're sitting around defining values. And it took a half a day to do that. And her boss was getting really frustrated. Now, I didn't know this. He didn't let on to me, but he was really frustrated because he wanted to get to the meat of this thing. Yeah. She goes, but then when day 2 and day 3 came around, that the values tied back into the plan. And if we hadn't spent the time working on those values, and I'll tell you one of the values, the first time I'd ever heard this, it came up and it was unanimous among the whole group. Love was a value for their organization. Like, whoa, that was new to me, right? So that everything that we talked about in the next couple of days to get into their plan centered around those values, their growth plans, their hiring plans, all those plans came around those values. And those values led the company for the next couple of years. So it's interesting that values tie to business success too. And she pointed that out in the foreword. It was like, oh man, that was so great. Well, my heart grew 3 times reading that. It was just cool.
Like the Grinch?
Yeah, a lot like the Grinch.
No, I love hearing that story though, because what I hear in that is I hear connection, and I hear when you got a lot of people involved, you've collaborated at a high level, and you've got everybody, you just said the words, everyone was unanimous on the value of love. Yeah. That's crazy because now you've got just total connection, total buy-in. I mean, that's retention at its highest level because when people are running. Now, here's the hard part, long-term, because I want to say this. It's one thing to create the values. You need to make sure they're matching with your own values. Now it's a whole other thing to execute on them, and you got to live them. I mean, you actually have to, it doesn't.
So I like the word living them much better than execute on them.
Yeah.
Like executing sounds like I'm doing something.
No, you got to live them. You got to live them. You got to embody them. You know, we talked about that before, is to embody the value, embody the mission. And you really have to, because if you have values to say one thing and you're doing something different, people are going to sniff that out right away. And you want employees to go walking out the door.
Then you get the opposite of employee retention, right? Yeah. But here's another aspect of that leads to employee retention, and that is, it is leading with your values in your hiring process.
Yeah.
It is leading with the values in the hiring process.
Well, when I hire, I state our values. It's an automatic question for me, is I want to know what the person that I'm talking to, that I'm interviewing, I want to know what their values are. And I want to know if they match our values. Then I share what our values are. And
so you ask theirs first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had an EO mentor actually came and did a retreat with us. And he said during his hiring process, his values are all over the walls in his building and all of that. But he purposely puts the employees back to the wall that these values are on, because you know how to do an interview, right?
Yeah.
Look around the room and say, what's important to them is important to me.
Yeah.
So he does the same thing. He asks about their values, but he makes sure that they don't see theirs. Now, hopefully, and he said, it can't fool them, right? Hopefully these people are going onto their website and finding out what those values are and interviewing well based on what they know about the company. Okay, so it's not foolproof interviewing technique, but it's certainly good. But you can get people to tell stories about how those values play in their lives.
You know what's
how
great?
Their stated values play in their lives.
What I love about this conversation and where we've taken it is, we're talking about non-monetary things.
I was just saying,
to retain employees, and as we're talking through it, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, wow, there really are so many non-monetary tools. I think a lot of people just immediately go to compensation, benefits, these type of retention things.
And it's important. You got to pay people. You got to pay people fairly.
I don't want to diminish any of that, but I think that there's far more non-monetary things that a business can and should be doing to retain employees.
Yeah. If I believe, and I don't have any empirical evidence to support this, but I believe if you are matching people's offers that they got, those sorts of things, you're always going to be chasing that employee. So let's say one of my top people came into me and said, hey, I need to get a raise because someone else is offering me a ton of money and I really want to stay here. I believe, and maybe I might need to do that for a short period of time. I don't know. Can't always say. But if I chase them with money only, then I'm going to be chasing them again at some point. Their resume is still on the street. They're still looking. I'm just satisfying them. What was the word you used? Temporarily?
Yeah, temporarily.
It's a temporary solution.
Yeah. It is always a temporary. I mean, in my experience, and I've had it happen a couple of times where, I have made the mistake. I don't do that anymore. Somebody comes in and they want to leave and they've got an offer. I say, congratulations. And I say, thank you. Thank you so much for all the hard work and that you put in at this company. Appreciate you very much. And that's the end of it. Is there a way I can help you? Anything like that? It's like, they've already got their foot out the door. Any type of, reaction to keep them there is making decisions out of fear, which I don't like that. And then it becomes a situation where the tail's wagging the dog. And
this may not be 100% foolproof, right? There may be situations out there that someone's going to say, well, this happened and it worked out for me. Great.
There's some exceptions, right? Yeah, there's some exceptions. It depends on how critical that person is to the business too. You might have somebody that has, super secret sauce and they're the only one that can do it. Okay, you got to figure something out, right?
Well, I still have a problem having that much dependence on that person. That's like putting all your money into one stock.
Well, yeah, shame on me for not building that.
Sure. So that's the different problem, right? So and if it happens and I've got to create that short-term solution, then I'm also going to create a long-term solution that probably is not going to include that person.
Yep.
It maybe they stay and maybe it works, but I'm getting a backup plan.
But the reality is you're going to be revisiting that. To your point, you are 100% for sure going to be revisiting that topic again, most likely in a year. Once you've kept them, you've done
6 months.
Or 6 months. Right? I mean,
whatever their time frame is that they think they deserve another raise, they can go get a raise outside. They can.
Yeah.
Someone's going to pay more for talent, right?
Well, then, so let's talk about that. Let's just talk about the compensation side. Okay. And I'll say this, what I've learned over the years is that everybody is different. And I think it's a false expectation to make any sort of assumption on what you know or don't know about that individual in their role and how happy they are with regards to that role and how happy they are with the compensation. And so one thing is seek to understand. Mm-hmm. We talk a lot about this. I follow suit, seek first to understand. I'm always going to want to know. I think we talked about performance reviews, and we talked about one-on-ones during our conversation around meetings. And I think that's so incredibly important that you're keeping your finger on the pulse as much as possible, because you have to know. You should know. It shouldn't come as a surprise if somebody says, "Hey, I got an offer," or they're asking for more money, or they're asking those questions. And if you have a culture of transparency, psychological safety, you've created this openness for them to come to you. You should be able to have a good open dialogue around what's next from a compensation perspective.
So that's a good point that you did at the end, is that they're not going to come to you, even if you are proactive and having all these one-on-ones and doing that, if you have not created the conditions for them to be transparent and honest with you.
Yeah.
And that's on you. It's not on them, right? If somebody's not telling you the full truth, first of all, we say, "Oh gosh, they just didn't tell me the whole truth."
Yeah.
That's not their fault. That's your fault.
Yeah.
You can create that environment called, as you said, psychological safety, for them to be open enough, to trust you enough to tell you something without fear of whatever retribution there might be.
Yep.
If you do that, you have a much better chance of getting the full information.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, very little chance of getting the full information until they're ready to quit. Then they'll tell you.
Yeah.
Maybe in the exit interview, they might tell you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think those types of conversations, the candid conversations, have to be taking place on a regular basis. That is a big driver. Now, getting back to the retention part is, I've learned that everybody's a little bit different. So I just want to talk about a couple of mistakes I've made in the past where, I was anticipating, some compensation move with certain individuals. And I came to them and said, "Hey, I've created this opportunity for you. I want to offer you commission and blah, 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 blah." And I put this in front of them and I did all this work to put it. And I remember one of the first times I made that mistake. And I remember that person just giving me this blank stare back at me. Like she had no idea what the hell was going on. It was like, I could tell she felt very bamboozled when what I thought I was putting in front of her was this really awesome opportunity for her. And reality was she was going to do the same amount of work for a small, bump in compensation. She was happy to get that. And so I think, again, don't make the assumption that whatever it is you're going to put together is going to land the way that you think it's going to land with somebody. So when you have those open dialogues, you're going to get great feedback.
Well, you said it exactly right. Don't make the assumption about. Don't make any assumptions.
Yeah.
Don't make any assumptions. Yeah. Now, you could start with some assumptions to see where you might be starting, but don't impose your assumptions on a situation before you get more facts. This communication hierarchy we've talked about in several podcast episodes. Assuming is the lowest form of communication you can have. It is lower than carrier pigeons. It's just like, I might be right if I assume what I know is in your head.
Yeah.
I got a better chance of asking you and finding out. If I've created this psychological safety and the conditions for that, and I ask you a question, I got a good chance of getting a good answer.
Yeah.
The answer, not my assumed answer.
Yeah.
There's probably a gap between those two things.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Okay.
The other thing I've learned too, Scott, so let's just talk about the whole benefits thing, because I do think that's an important part of it. I have learned that benefits are incredibly important to people.
Yep.
And I think that there's a lot of small businesses out there that are just totally missing the boat. So they don't want to spend the money on a health benefits plan, which, by the way, in California, if you didn't know, if you've got, more than, I shouldn't say with with also a 401k plan, so a retirement plan. If you didn't know this, if you got 4 or more employees, the state of California is requiring you to have a retirement plan. You've been living under a rock if you don't know that. But with health benefits too, is there are a lot of requirements, and I think companies are still trying to save money. They don't do health benefit plans, and I think it's the number one way to retain an employee and attract talent. You got to have a robust health benefit plan with things like disability, group disability.
And it may not matter to someone under 26 because they don't realize how important the health benefits are because mom and dad are still paying for those. But it's going to matter to their mom and dad. Their mom and dad will encourage them to get on your plan, certainly.
It will, but you're right. Yeah. It's great. So 26 and above, that's a really great distinction. So anybody over 26 it's going to be very important. Yeah. You're required to carry health insurance in the state of California. I mean, I think the whole United States, but at this point, I think as a small business, I mean, if you've got more than 5 employees at this point, I think you got to be looking into those type of benefits, my opinion.
So what about time off? How are we working the time off thing? Is it PTO now? Or are you doing the sick day? I used to have a whole Machiavellian process about this. I would tell people, if you're sick, stay home. If you're healthy, come to work. I don't believe in mental health days. So when they ask me how many sick days do I get? If you're sick, just stay home. Don't be around us, right? It's a horrible, horrible approach to. It's horrible. What I was trying to be like saying, if you're sick, I'm going to give you as many days as you need. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. But what was heard was, if you're healthy, come to work. I don't give mental health days.
Yeah.
Well, I do give mental health days now. Yeah. People need mental health days.
No, for sure they do. I think you got to offer a high level of flexibility. That said, you have to have a policy. I mean, you can't help. You got to have an employee handbook. You should have a policy in place.
There are companies that don't. Large companies, Netflix, Rivian, both. Unlimited vacation.
Well, no, I'm saying though that's within their policy.
Well, it's still part of their
policy.
Their
policy is, it's their policy. I totally agree. I'm just saying, like, whatever that is, whether it's unlimited or not, you've got to have some sort of policy in place
so that people understand it and people recognize that it's fair to all.
Right.
We talked before about equity being more important than equality. There are places that people are going to challenge you on that and want equality. Well, it's not fair that Vince got an extra day and I didn't, right? Yeah. So equality does matter, but equity is more important, and that is, what is it that you need?
Yeah.
Right. So, but yes, having a policy in place that is consistent and fair to all is important.
Well,
it'll be held against you if you're not.
And equitable to all, as you pointed out. And I think that is a really, really important point. And there are companies that are giving unlimited PTO. And there are a lot of companies that just do PTO. So it's literally just, whether it's unlimited or not, there is the method of, you've got, whatever, let's call it 10 PTO days, do whatever you want. You've got 15 PTO days. We don't care. You take them whenever you want, however you want. There's no vacation. There's no sick days. There's no nothing. You just got 15 PTO days. There is that method. We do follow the traditional method of, you get vacation, you accrue it depending on how long you've been with the company over time. So you can reach a point where you've got 4 or 5 weeks a year, I think, something to that effect. And then you get whatever the state allows for sick days. We do term it sick days. We started to do, here's what happens, and I want to urge everybody this. This is why I say you got to have a policy. It needs to be clear and it needs to be equitable. Problem was, we were running into this problem where we had PTO, we had vacation, and we had sick days. And people were confusing all of it, right? And then we also had a floating holiday for Thanksgiving, so that everybody got that Friday off, right? So it was just a floating holiday. Well, then people would put in for the floating holiday off on some random day.
Right.
And so it got to this point where it's super messy. Not their fault. We're the ones that made it messy.
You created the system.
Because we created a system that wasn't clear as to how to use these things. And so what I'm urging you is, whatever you come up with, and there's a lot of different methodologies, a lot of different opinions on this type of stuff, whatever you come up with, you've got to make it simple. You've got to make it clear. You've got to make it equitable, and it's got to be written in the employee handbook. And that's it. Yeah. But you got to have, above all of that, I think what we've tried to do is create flexibility. I recognize that people are human beings. They have lives, they have families, they have kids, they have things that are going on in their lives. And, you can't just shut the door on it and
Sure.
show up at work. And so we try to create as much flexibility. And what we've done, I think, to retain very key people within the organization is gone to this hybrid remote work environment. And, we're allowing more and more people to be remote, to move to other states, to be flexible enough to come in to the office 3 days out of the week, work from home 2 days out of the week, these type of things where it just creates a better lifestyle for these folks.
How's your productivity been?
Through the roof.
So improved, not deep.
Through the roof. I've never been a part of a more productive organization.
Great. So here's the point. We can assume what benefits are important to our organization as well. And that's what I used to do. Just assume, here's what it is. It's standards, a little bit better than the industry. We're going to assume if that's not what your people want, it's a waste of time, energy, and money to create that. So go back to that communication process and find out.
Yeah.
And you can't change it every year, and you can't do that. But we got our core group of people now. We got a big enough company that we got to start working on our benefits. Let's go find out what's important to them. Is this benefit important? No. Yes. Whatever. Right. Educate them on the value of them and let them we can't give everything. Can't afford to.
No.
But what are the things that are important to you because we want to take care of?
But pay the maximum you can pay on that. Like, let's just talk about health benefits. Pay the maximum you can afford to pay. It's tax deductible to the business. Yeah. It's a win-win. The employee is super happy. You're paying for their health benefits and you get to deduct it. So, it's a win-win. And I think employers, a lot that I've talked to in the small business arena, they get stuck on the cost.
Yep.
They get stuck on the cost. And I think it's a silly thing and they're missing the boat because you'd have much higher employee retention if you paid closer.
So I would ask those same people that are getting stuck on the cost, let's take a look at your stats on turnover, right? Find out, how are you doing? 24, 25%? That happened during the pandemic to almost everybody.
Not only that, it's like, let's look at, I'd challenge it even further.
Can you afford that?
Let me see your P&L and let me look at your travel and entertainment expenses and some, let me look at the equipment that you're paying for at the end of the year and all this other stuff. And let me look at the taxes that you're paying. It's just like, some people, are you kidding me? You'd rather pay taxes or put that money in the pocket of your employees.
To your people.
Yeah, it's such a simple thing for retention. You just got to do it. Last thing is just salary, right? It's just compensation or commissions and things like that. And I think probably as a best practice, which is what we do, we're constantly looking at the market. We're doing the market comps. We have a firm that we work with, and anytime that we're reviewing on an annual basis, especially anytime we're reviewing salaries, hourly rates, things like that, we just do the market research and we get the comps. So we know that we're competitive. We're not going to be at the top. We're not going to be at the bottom, but we're going to make sure that our employees are paid at a very competitive rate.
So adjust annually if you can afford it, and if you can't afford it, look elsewhere for places to save. Exactly. So you can afford it.
Exactly.
I think that's the point you're making.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's important to keep people treated fairly, being open and honest, finding the benefits, the things that are important to them, paying them fairly, giving them development and opportunity. You do those things, you're going to have a pretty good retention rate, right?
No question.
Yeah.
No question. At an absolute high level. And Scott, I've learned the hard way. I mean, there's been a lot of trial and error on everything that I just shared. And I've made a lot of mistakes in the past around, everything from culture to values to benefits to compensation,
Good. Learn from his mistakes.
Easy way to do it.
Watch Vince and do something else. Sorry.
All right, man. Well, we're hitting time, everybody. And love that conversation, Scott. I think that was a great topic for us to start the year. We've got our next podcast episode. We're going to continue along this line, talking about employment law. And so I think that's equally important, especially if you're a California corporation.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a California corporation. And I think even when we're talking about retention, it's important if you are a California corporation that there's a lot of things to pay attention to that you just have to be doing anyways because the state requires it.
Absolutely.
So easy things. All right. Well, that's about it. Any last words?
No, wrapped it up. I think that's good. I'm looking forward to the next episode. I like getting into employment law. I think it's fun
too.
because it changes so often.
Well, we got a great guest.
I learn something every time.
You haven't met our guest yet, but I'm excited to have her on.
Wonderful.
All right. Until next time. Thanks for listening, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for the CEO Podcast. Please visit us at theceopodcast.net, where you can learn more about our co-hosts and listen to past episodes. If you would like to have a discussion and dive deeper into any topic, there is also an option to contact Scott or Vince to schedule some time with them. Thanks for listening.